Hello everybody, today I'm going to be talking about beach reads. To be honest, looking at the weather at the moment, it's not great, but if you are going abroad, these are just a set of books that I think are really great beach reads. Very quick, fast-paced, easy reads, and just great for on the beach, for on holidays, whatever. I tend to lean towards three different categories when I am thinking about books I can take away with me, and the three categories of that are thrillers, which seems like a bit of an odd choice with it being dark and sort of murder sometimes. A lot of the time you get through them really quickly because they're like, oh my god, what happens next? So thrillers is the first genre, contemporary is the second genre, kind of self-explanatory, and travel is the third genre. So I'm sort of going to be tapping into those today and just sort of showing you some of my favourite books. So I'm going to start off with some stuff in the thriller genre, and I'm actually going to go for a classic first, which I understand it's not really what you think of when you think of beach reads. You don't think of classics, but I found this one really sort of accessible. I actually read it a couple of years ago and reviewed it on this channel. You can still find it somewhere, but to be honest, it was like when I was starting out YouTube, and when you start out YouTube it's not great, but I'm sure you can find many reviews of this online anyway, and it's The Collector by Fowles. This is a story of a man who becomes slightly obsessed with this woman, and he actually takes her hostage. It's told from both of their perspectives, both his and hers, and that's what I found really interesting about this book. There's a bit of sort of unreliable narrating going on. Narrating, and like I say, it's really weird concept being like reading about abduction and things like that on holiday, but because it's so fast-paced and quite like you want to know what happens next, you can get through it really quickly. I really enjoy it, and I think it would be a great beach read. Along the sort of same vein as that one is a book that I actually read on my Kindle, and it's called You by Caroline Katniss. This is actually a very similar story to The Collector, in that it is about obsession and manipulation in love. It's much more modern than The Collector. The Collector was written in 1963, whereas You uses a lot more sort of modern technology. So a lot of sort of Twitter and Facebook comes into play with it, and is used really well, which is obviously something that wasn't around in 1963. Again, fast-paced, unreliable narrator again, and I find that really interesting. I love it when you can't really rely on the narrators to tell you stuff. Much more of an experience for you as a reader. An honourable mention is a book called The Lie Tree, and this is a book that I recently listened to on Audible. It's actually a children's novel, I think. Sort of historical, sort of fantasy, but it is so good. And it doesn't really fit under the category of thriller, but it kind of features under the category of mystery, so that's why I thought I would mention it. It's so good, it's well worth every award it's won, and it's definitely not a kind of classic children's book. Two travel books I'm going to mention. These are just some of my favourites. I'm not going to go too into depth with travel books because I want to do a whole separate video on this, because I've read quite a few travel books lately, and I have lots of recommendations, so I'm going to do like a proper video on that. But two that I really enjoy, one being Wild by Cheryl, and again, I've already read this and reviewed this on this channel, so you can go and check out my review and see what you think of it. This is a non-fiction book, and it's about the author when she decided to trek across America. It's very honest, very funny, and it's just, I don't know why, but I love reading about travel while I'm travelling, even if I've travelled to like Tenerife or something. That's not, it's not travelling as such as it's a holiday, but I love reading stuff like this when I'm away, because I feel like if I read it at home it makes me really depressed that I'm like at home and I'm going to work and I can't go travelling. So if I'm already on a beach, it's sort of halfway out, but it is well worth checking out. I haven't actually seen the film of this, so if you enjoy the film and think I should watch it, then do let me know in the comments. Another travel book that I also don't have here with me is Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. I've read two of Jon Krakauer's books, Into the Wild and Into Thin Air. Both fantastic reads, so I would recommend either of them. But I just enjoyed Into the Wild a little bit more. Into Thin Air is about an expedition up Mount Everest. Really sort of engaging, but there's a lot of information and climbers sort of jargon and things like that, whereas Into the Wild is just a really sort of heartbreaking story. Again, a true story about a guy who one day sort of decides to cut up his credit cards and things and just sort of go travelling around Alaska, and it doesn't end great, but it's a fantastic read. The sort of honourable mention of the travel section is called Honeymooning with My Brother. It's a book that I've only read recently, so I haven't mentioned on this channel yet. I will be mentioning it in a wrap up and the future travel books video, but it's a true story about a man who was stood up at his wedding by his wife, and instead of sort of wallowing in self-pity, he decides to go on his honeymoon with his brother, and they sort of travel around and they catch the travel bug and decide to quit their jobs and travel more, and it's a really great story. I'll go more into depth in a future video, but yes, definitely check out the synopsis and things on Goodreads. Next, I'm going to recommend two contemporary books. The first being The Versions of Us by Laura Barnett, and I've mentioned this quite a few times on my channel, but I've never actually, not since I've read it. This is a story of a couple, but instead of just your stereotypical romance story, it kind of takes place in 3 different timelines. So for one timeline, they might meet by him bumping into her. The next timeline they might meet like at a party where they get introduced, and the other timeline might be that they don't meet at all. So there's like different outcomes of each sort of scenario. At first it's kind of difficult to read because you have to kind of keep track of 3 stories rather than just one romance story. But once you sort of get into the feel of it, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely a different kind of take on a romance novel. It's not just a fluffy romance, but I thought I would recommend it just because I don't actually hear a lot of people talking about it. I find it really difficult because I quite like a romance book, but I don't like chick lit that much. I find them really predictable, so this is just something a little bit different. And the final book I want to recommend is London Belongs to Us by Sarah Manning. This is a book that I recently read because I was recently sent it. As you can see, it's quite short, and it's definitely a book that you can flick through really fast. It actually takes place over one night, and it's about the characters going around London. The author actually sort of made London a character, and I thought that was really interesting. It showed the different diversities in London, which was great. And I love books set in London, and I like being able to recognise, if you've been to London and you've been to some of these important landmarks and things, you will be able to recognise them from the book, and that's what I like. I like kind of knowing what I'm reading about. Again, YA, so it's a very easy read, but very fun, and a really nice beach read. So those are my beach reads. I haven't given you an awful lot. There's just a nice little variety of contemporaries. If you haven't tried reading, like if you always read thrillers on the beach, try reading contemporaries. And if you always read contemporaries, try reading a bit of thriller, because sometimes it's nice you take a book that you wouldn't necessarily read in your day-to-day life, because sometimes you connect more with the book. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Let me know what you will be reading on the beach if you have any summer reading plans, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!